My husband's fist left a bruise burning across my forehead, but the real pain came when my parents saw it and turned away without a word. I stood frozen in our Ventsgale home, Kaspars' laughter slicing through me like a knife. "What a family," he sneered. "Have you ever been betrayed by the ones you trusted most? Stay with me to see how I turned my rage into a fight for freedom that shook a town." Before starting this story, if you are listening from USA, please leave a comment with number 9. And if you are from another country, please leave the name of your lovely country. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to listen to more stories. My name is Lina Vetra, and he struck me hard enough to leave a bruise blossoming across my forehead. The pain lingered, sharp and hot, but it was nothing compared to the sting of my parents' silence when they saw it. I stood in our small wooden house on Daugava Lane, in the quiet town of Ventsgale, as they turned their backs and walked away. Kaspars, my husband, sprawled in the armchair, his laughter cutting through the air like a blade. "What a fine family you've got, Lina," he sneered, his voice dripping with venom. That moment, in the chill of a late September evening, burned itself into my soul, fueling a rage I could no longer bury. The house smelled of pine logs and the faint, sour tang of Kaspars' cheap beer, spilled carelessly on the rug. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the sloped roof, as if the world itself sensed the fracture within these walls. The bruise throbbed, a cruel reminder of his hand. But I didn't touch it. I stood frozen by the window, staring at the cobblestone path where my parents, Juris and Aja Kalnins, had just disappeared. They'd arrived without warning, as they often did, their arms laden with market bags stuffed with rye bread and beets, the scent of earth clinging to their coats. I'd turned to face them, the bruise impossible to hide under the dim glow of the oil lamp. Aja's hands trembled, her bag slipping slightly. Juris's eyes darkened, not with concern, but with a cold calculation, as if measuring the cost of speaking. Neither said a word. The silence hung heavy, thicker than the fog rolling off the Daugava River. Behind me, the old clock on the mantel ticked, each second a hammer against my heart. Kaspars stirred, his boots scuffing the floor as he leaned forward, the armchair creaking under his weight. His laughter was a mockery, not just of me, but of the life we'd built or the lie I'd let it become. "They didn't even blink," he said, his voice low and smug. "Polite little folks, aren't they?" I didn't turn to face him. I couldn't. My fingers curled into fists, nails biting into my palms, as a fury rose in my chest, hot and unrelenting. How dare they leave me here, in this cage of a home, with a man who treated me like a shadow? How dare they see my pain and choose to say nothing? My parents' footsteps had faded, but the betrayal lingered, raw and jagged. They'd walked back to their car, their bags rustling, as if my suffering was just another errand to ignore. I stood there, the bruise pulsing, my heart pounding with a rage I'd never allowed myself to feel. Kaspars' laughter faded, but the silence he left behind was louder. A scream I couldn't voice. I was alone, but something inside me stirred a spark of defiance, whispering that I deserved more than this. The bruise on my forehead pulsed like a heartbeat, but it was the memory of a few hours ago that seared my soul. In the cramped kitchen of our Ventsgale home, I, Lina Vetra, had dared to demand respect from Kaspars Rudis, my husband. His hand met my cheek with a force that sent me crashing against the wooden table, and in that moment, a rage ignited within me, fierce and unyielding, screaming that I deserved better than his cruelty. The pain wasn't just physical, it was the shattering of a life I'd clung to, believing I could endure his venom for the sake of peace. The kitchen was a mess of unwashed dishes and the faint smell of beet soup gone cold, left simmering too long on the stove. The late September light filtered through a cracked window, casting jagged shadows across the sagging cabinets. I'd been scrubbing a pot, my hands raw from the effort, when Kaspars stumbled in, his breath heavy with beer. He'd been muttering about his day at the sawmill, his voice a low growl of complaints. I'd heard it all before, but something snapped inside me. "Stop treating me like I'm nothing," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. His eyes narrowed, dark and unreadable, like the Daugava River at midnight. "What did you just say?" he asked, his tone flat, daring me to repeat it. "I did. I'm not your punching bag. Kaspars." The words felt like a release, a truth I'd buried for too long. But before I could brace myself, his hand swung, a blur of motion that cracked against my face. My head snapped back, and I stumbled, my hip slamming into the table's edge. A glass tumbler fell, shattering on the tile floor, its shards glinting like broken promises. Pain exploded across my cheek, and a warm trickle of blood ran from my lip. I gasped, clutching the table to steady myself, my vision swimming. Kaspars loomed over me, his face a mask of cold indifference. "You done talking now," he said, his voice soft, almost tender, as if he hadn't just torn my world apart. Then came the apology, as predictable as the church bells on Sunday. He reached out, his hand hovering near my shoulder, but I flinched away. "Lina, you know I didn't mean it," he said, his eyes softening in that practiced way that once fooled me. "You push me, and I lose my temper. Let's not make this a thing." My heart pounded, not with fear, but with a fury that burned hotter than the pain. How dare he blame me for his violence? How dare he think a few words could erase the blood on my lip? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stood there, wiping my mouth with a trembling hand, the taste of iron sharp on my tongue. The kitchen clock ticked, relentless, as I realized I'd been a fool to think silence could protect me. Something had to change, or I'd lose myself forever. The weight of my silence had crushed me long enough. In the dim glow of Jintar's cafe, nestled in the heart of Ventsgale's cobblestone square, I, Lina Vetra, sat trembling, my fingers hovering over my phone. The bruise on my forehead throbbed, a cruel echo of Kaspars's violence, but a fiercer fire burned within me, a rage that screamed I was more than his victim. I typed a message to my friend Zane Lipa. "I'm ready." My heart pounded as I hit send, knowing this was the moment I'd stop hiding from the truth. I was done letting Kaspars Rudies cage my life, and the fury coursing through my veins demanded action. The cafe hummed with the soft clink of porcelain cups and the rich scent of roasted coffee, mingling with the warm aroma of fresh rye bread from the counter. Outside, the late September wind swept through the square, scattering golden leaves across the stones. I'd slipped out of the house on Daugava Lane, claiming I needed air, my breath catching as I feared Kaspars might follow. But he hadn't. He was likely still sprawled in his armchair, oblivious to the storm I was about to unleash. The cafe's wooden walls, adorned with faded photos of Ventsgale's fishing boats, felt like a sanctuary. But my hands shook as I waited for Zane. She'd always seen through my excuses, her sharp eyes catching the shadows I tried to hide. Now, I needed her strength more than ever. The door chimed, and Zane stepped in, her coat dusted with autumn mist. She carried a worn leather satchel, her face set with a quiet resolve that steadied my nerves. Without a word, she slid into the booth across from me, her gaze locking onto the Bruise. "Lina," she said softly, "you don't have to stay." Her words cracked something open inside me, a flood of anger at the years I'd wasted under Kaspars's control. "I know," I whispered, my voice raw. "I'm done." Zane nodded, unzipping the satchel to reveal a folder thick with papers, a lease for a small apartment near the Daugava River, bank statements showing Kaspars's secret withdrawals from my savings, and a notarized affidavit from a nurse who'd seen my injuries last spring. "This is your way out," Zane said, her voice firm, "but you have to take it." My fingers traced the folder's edge. each page a piece of my stolen life. The rage surged again, hot and unyielding, as I imagined Kaspars' smug face when he realized I'd outsmarted him. I slipped the folder into my bag, my resolve hardening like the river ice that would soon form. Back home, I moved silently through the kitchen, the air heavy with the stale smell of Kaspars' beer. My heart raced as I placed a sealed envelope on the table, its contents a mirror of the folder Zane had given me. It was a warning, a declaration that his reign was over. As I stepped back, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows, as if Ventsgale itself urged me forward. I wasn't just leaving, I was fighting for the woman I'd forgotten I could be. The envelope lay on the kitchen table like a silent accusation, its edges sharp against the worn wood of our Ventsgale home. I, Lina Vetra, stood in the shadowed doorway of the living room, my heart hammering as Kaspars Rudy's. My husband lurched from his armchair, his eyes catching the paper. The bruise on my forehead burned, but it was the rage coursing through me white-hot and unrelenting that steadied my gaze. For too long, I'd been his prey. But tonight, in the chill of late September, I was done cowering. As he tore open the envelope, his face twisted with fury, and I stepped forward, ready to face the storm I'd unleashed, knowing Zane Lipa stood behind me, her phone capturing every moment. The room reeked of stale beer and the faint smoke of a dying fire in the hearth. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows of our Daugava Lane house, as if Ventsgale itself sensed the reckoning. Kaspars' boots scuffed the floor as he stumbled toward the table, his fingers fumbling with the envelope. "What's this nonsense?" "Lina," he snarled, his voice thick with menace. The papers spilled out bank statements circled in red, a notarized affidavit, a grainy photo of my bruised arm from last spring. His eyes widened, then narrowed. A predator cornered? "You think you can play games with me?" he roared, slamming his fist on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. My breath caught, but I didn't flinch. The fury that had simmered for years erupted, a volcano of defiance. "No games." "Kaspars," I said, my voice low and steady. "Just the truth you can't hide anymore." He lunged, his hand seizing my wrist, his grip tight enough to bruise anew. "You're nothing without me," he hissed, his breath hot against my face. My heart raced, but I met his glare, my voice cutting through the air. "Let go, or you'll regret it." From the corner, Zane stepped forward, her phone raised, the red light of its recording unyielding. "Get your hands off her," she said, her tone flat but laced with steel. Kaspars froze, his eyes darting to the device, panic flickering across his face. He released my wrist, staggering back, his bravado crumbling. "You brought her to spy on me," he sputtered, his voice cracking with disbelief. "You're setting me up!" I straightened, my shoulders squared, the rage fueling every word. "I'm saving myself," I said, "and you're the one who's trapped." The room pulsed with tension, the clock ticking like a countdown. Kaspars' face contorted, a mix of anger and desperation, as he jabbed a finger at me. "You'll pay for this! Lina, I'll tell everyone you're crazy, that you're lying." His words were a desperate claw at control, but they fell flat. I held up my phone, my voice calm but razor sharp. "I called the police. Kaspars." "They're already here." His head snapped toward the window, where blue and red lights flashed through the curtains, painting the walls with their relentless glow. The sound of gravel crunching under tires pierced the silence, followed by a sharp knock at the door. Kaspars' shoulders slumped, his defiance draining like water through a cracked dam. "You didn't," he whispered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. I walked to the door, my steps deliberate, my heart pounding with a strange mix of fear and triumph. Zane followed, her phone still recording, a silent witness to the end of his reign. As I opened the door, 2 officers stepped into the dim light of the porch Dace Vanags. her face stern, and Arthur's Zyle, his hand resting on his radio. Lina Vetra Dace asked, her eyes flicking to Kaspars. I nodded, gesturing to the table. The evidence is there, I said, my voice unwavering. Kaspars lunged toward the papers, but Arthur's moved faster, his voice firm. Sit down, sir. Kaspars sank into a chair, his hands raised in a mockery of innocence. She's lying, he shouted, his voice shrill. She's unstable, always has been. Dace ignored him, flipping through the documents, her expression hardening as she read. These are notarized, she said, glancing at me with a nod. We'll take it from here. The officers moved toward Kaspars, their cuffs glinting in the lamplight. He resisted, twisting in his seat, his voice rising to a frantic pitch. You can't do this. She's framing me. But Dace's grip was unyielding as she cuffed his wrists, the metal clicking shut with a finality that echoed in my chest. My rage didn't fade, but it shifted, tempered by a cold satisfaction. For the first time, I saw him for what he was, a coward unmasked, his power stripped away. As they led him out, his eyes met mine, wild with fury. But I didn't look away. This isn't over, he spat. But I smiled, a small, defiant curve of my lips. Yes, it is, I said softly, the words carrying the weight of years reclaimed. The door closed behind them, and the silence that followed was mine, not his. The air in my new apartment on Kuldara Court felt sharper, cleaner, but it couldn't dull the ache of betrayal. I, Lina Vetra, stood by the window, staring at the Daugava River's silver ribbon winding through Ventsgale, my heart heavy with the silence of my mother. Ija Kalnins, Kaspars Rudis, was gone, hauled away in cuffs, but the victory felt hollow when I dialed Ija's number, hoping for her support, only to hear her cold rebuke. The rage that had fueled my defiance now turned inward, a searing fury at the family who'd abandoned me. Then, in a smoky tavern on the television screen, Kaspars' face appeared, his lies stoking my anger anew, reminding me that my fight was far from over. The apartment was small, its wooden floors creaking under my bare feet, the scent of fresh paint mingling with the damp autumn breeze slipping through the window. It was late September, and the pine forest beyond the river loomed dark against the twilight sky. I'd moved here hours after Kaspars' arrest, my few belongings hastily packed, my bruise still tender but fading. The phone felt heavy in my hand as I called Asia, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. Mama, I said, Kaspars is in custody. He hurt me, and I need you to know. The line crackled, her breath catching, but no warmth followed. Lina, she said, her tone clipped. You're dragging our name through the mud. Marriage is hard work, not a spectacle. My grip tightened, nails biting into my palm. He beat me, I snapped, my voice rising with a fury I couldn't contain. You saw the bruise and walked away. Her silence was a blade, cutting deeper than Kaspars' hand. We raised you to be stronger, she said finally, then hung up, leaving me staring at the phone, my heart splintering. I sank onto the couch, the fabric rough against my skin, and opened my journal, a gift from Zane Lipa. My pen scratched across the page, each word a vow I don't need their approval to survive. The act of writing anchored me, but the rage still burned, a fire fed by Ija's indifference and Juris's complicity. How could they choose propriety over their daughter? The question gnawed at me, unanswered, as I wrestled with the pain of their betrayal. I'd fought for my freedom, but their silence made me feel like a stranger in my own family. Then, the television flickered, its volume low but piercing. I glanced up, and there was Kaspars, his face smug in the dim light of a Ventsgale tavern. My wife's unstable, he told a reporter, his voice smooth with practiced deceit. She's spinning lies to ruin me. My blood boiled, my hands clenching into fists. The nerve of him, painting himself as the victim while I bore the scars of his cruelty. The reporter nodded, oblivious to the truth, and I slammed the remote down, the plastic cracking against the table. My fury wasn't just for Kaspars, it was for a world that might believe him, for a family that had already turned away. I stood, my resolve hardening like the frost creeping over the river. This wasn't the end. I'd make sure his lies crumbled, no matter the cost. The truth was a weapon, and I, Lina Vetra, wielded it with a fury that could shatter the lies Kaspars Rudies had built. From my apartment on Kuldara Court, I sent a dossier of evidence to Ilse Berzens, a journalist in the nearby city of Liepāja, my heart pounding with defiance. Days later, her article hit Ventsgale like a storm, exposing Kaspars's cruelty. But the battle wasn't over. In the stone-walled Salaspils Hall, I joined forces with Elza Ozola and Marta Krumens, two women scarred by the same man, to launch a website bearing our proof. Then, a chilling message from an unknown number lit up my phone, Kaspars's threat reigniting my rage, daring me to keep fighting for justice. The October dawn painted the Daugava River in hues of steel and amber, its ripples glinting beyond my window. My laptop hummed on the kitchen table, its screen open to an email draft addressed to Ilse, a woman whose reporting I'd followed since seeing her expose a corrupt official in Riga. My fingers trembled as I attached files, photos of my bruises, audio of Kaspars's venomous rants, bank records of his theft from my savings. This is my story, I wrote, and I trust you to tell it. The rage that fueled me wasn't just for myself, but for every woman silenced by shame. I hit send, my breath catching, knowing this act could unravel Kaspars's facade or destroy me. When Ilse's article went live, it tore through Ventsgale's quiet streets, its headline branding Kaspars a predator. My phone buzzed with messages of support, but the fury in my chest didn't ease, it grew, fed by the memory of his smug lies on that tavern screen. Ilse connected me with Elza and Marta, and we met at Salaspils Hall, a weathered community center on the edge of town. The air smelled of brewed coffee and rye rolls from a morning meeting, the tall windows casting long shadows across the stone floor. Elza, with her steady gaze, spoke of Kaspars forging her signature to drain her business. Marta, her voice low, recounted years of isolation, her credit ruined by his schemes. Their stories mirrored mine, and the shared pain forged a bond stronger than steel. "We're not just victims," I said, my voice thick with anger. "We're the proof they ignored. We poured our evidence into a website, a single page listing our names, our testimonies, and a chilling audio clip of Kaspars sneering, 'No one cares what you say.'" My hands shook as I uploaded it, the rage at his arrogance driving each click. "They'll care now," Elza said, her eyes fierce, and Marta nodded, her fingers tracing a scar on her wrist. Our site went live, a beacon in the dark, and I felt a surge of hope, tempered by the fire of our collective defiance. But that night, as I stood in my apartment, the river's murmur soft through the open window. My phone vibrated on the counter. An unknown number flashed. "You'll regret this. Lina, stop now, or I'll make you." My blood ran cold, then boiled. Kaspars' words, even from a distance, were a claw at my freedom. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white, fury drowning out fear. How dare he think he could still control me? I didn't reply, but the threat lit a spark in my resolve. I saved the message, another piece of evidence, my anger a shield against his malice. The pine forest loomed beyond the glass, its shadows whispering of battles yet to come. I wasn't alone anymore. Elza, Marta, and Ilse stood with me, our voices a chorus that would not be silenced. Kaspars could threaten all he wanted, but I'd already survived his worst. Now, I'd make sure the world saw him for the monster he was, no matter what it cost. The chains of my past fell away, and I, Lina Vetra, stood taller in their absence, in the oak-paneled Salisbill's hall, Ventsgale's heart of justice. I filed the final divorce papers against Kaspars Rudis, my abuser, as Zane Lipa, Elza Ozola, and Marta Krumans stood by my side. The news of his downfall echoed through the town he'd been fired from the sawmill, a restraining order barring him from my life. Back in my Kuldara Court apartment, I lit a candle, its flame dancing against the Daugava River's reflection, a beacon of my hard-won peace. My fury had forged this victory, but now it softened into a quiet strength, a testament to the woman I'd become. The courtroom was warm, its wooden benches polished by years of Ventsgale's trials. Early October's light streamed through high windows, casting golden patterns on the floor. My hands steadied as I handed the papers to the clerk, each signature a severing of Kaspars's hold, Zane's reassuring nod, Elza's firm grip on my shoulder, and Marta's fierce smile anchored me. We'd fought together, our shared rage a fire that burned through his lies. The clerk stamped the documents, her voice crisp, processed. He's been served. Outside, the cobblestone square buzzed with market vendors, the scent of rye bread wafting through the air. But I felt a stillness within, a triumph born of defiance. Kaspars' fate was sealed days earlier. The sawmill, Ventsgale's largest employer, cut him loose after Ilse Berzens's article exposed his crimes. A court order now kept him at bay, his threats reduced to empty echoes. The rage that once consumed me fueled by his cruelty. My family's silence had transformed. It was no longer a wildfire but a steady flame, guiding me forward. I'd clawed my way out of his shadow, and the weight of that freedom was both exhilarating and humbling. My allies, women who'd shared my pain, stood as proof that I wasn't alone, their strength a mirror of my own. Back in my apartment, the river's gentle murmur soothed the lingering echoes of battle. I set the candle on the windowsill, its glow a soft rebellion against the darkness Kaspars had cast. The pine forest beyond stood sentinel, its branches swaying in the October breeze. I didn't need his remorse or my parents' approval. Juris and Aja's silence no longer defined me. My victory wasn't just his ruin, it was the reclaiming of my voice, my life. As the flame flickered, I exhaled, the air lighter than it had been in years. I'd survived, not by chance, but by choice, and that truth burned brighter than any anger ever could. I, Lina Vetra, stood by the window of my Kuldara Court apartment, the Daugava River shimmering under Ventsgale's October stars. The journey from Kaspars Rudis's shadow to this moment of freedom had been forged in pain. But now, as I gazed at the twinkling lights of the night market, a quiet hope bloomed within me. My story wasn't just mine, it was a beacon for every woman bearing silent scars. With a steady hand, I lit a candle, its flame a promise that healing needs no permission, a truth I'd learned through rage and resilience, meant to inspire others to reclaim their own light. The apartment was still, its wooden walls catching the candle's glow, the faint scent of pine drifting from the forest beyond, the market's hum vendors calling, laughter rising carried through the open window, a reminder of life's persistence. I'd walked a path of betrayal, from my parents' silence to Kaspars's cruelty, but each step had taught me my worth. Now, in early October, I stood unshackled, not by luck, but by choice. The fury that once drove me had softened, not into weakness, but into a strength that felt like home. I didn't need Aja or Joris Kalnins to validate my pain, nor Kaspars's remorse to mend my heart. I'd found my voice, and it was enough. My thoughts turned to those still trapped, women like I once was, hiding bruises behind closed doors. "You are not alone," I whispered, as if they could hear me through the glass. "Your scars don't define you, but your courage can." The candle flickered, its light reaching out to the river, a silent vow to those still fighting. I'd survived because I dared to act, because Zane Lipa, Elza Ozola, and Marta Krumans showed me solidarity, because Ilse Burzens amplified my truth. Their faces, etched with shared defiance, reminded me that hope isn't a gift, it's a fire you kindle yourself. The market lights danced, and I smiled, a small but genuine curve of my lips. Ventsgale, with its cobblestone heart, had witnessed my fall and rise. I didn't crave revenge anymore. I craved a world where no woman fears speaking her truth. As the candle burned, I made a final promise to live boldly, to love fiercely, to stand for those still finding their way. My story wasn't an end, but a beginning, a call to every heart hiding in the dark your healing waits. And it starts with you. This story of Lina Vetra's journey teaches us a profound lesson. Resilience and courage can transform pain into power. In a society where silence often cloaks injustice, Lina's defiance reminds us that our voices matter, especially when supported by a community of strength. Her triumph over betrayal and abuse reflects a universal truth. Your worth is not defined by those who hurt you, but by your resolve to rise. This narrative inspires us to confront our own challenges, seek solidarity, and embrace healing without seeking permission, fostering hope for a more just world. This story is a work of fiction created for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to attack or defame any individual, family, or organization. Any resemblance to real persons or events is purely coincidental. If this story moved you or sparked a thought, please let us know by commenting below. Your likes, shares, and subscriptions help us create more stories that inspire and entertain. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching and being part of our community.